business is interesting because the core, in my view, many people think that when you're running a business, it's the fact that you understand that particular trade is the magic. I've never felt that way. Understanding that trade gets you into the game. The magic is having the discipline to run the business correctly and in exposing yourself.
Welcome to the Flywheel Effect, the podcast where ambition meets expertise in the world of luxury home services. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a small business owner, or a forward-thinking professional, this is your platform for growth, profit, and prosperity. Each episode, we dive deep into how to leverage data for smarter business decisions and share insights that help you transition from technician to visionary. Let's jump in.
Hi, I'm Brent Sonnek-Schmelz, along with my co-host Matt Bernath. Welcome to another episode of the Flywheel Effect. We're here this week with Jim Pearse, the current CEO of ProSource, where he's been there for about 3 years, helping other integrators build their businesses and become better people. Prior to ProSource, Jim Pearse started his career at Ultimate Electronics, a family-owned electronics company that they built to 64 stores and went public. So he has a lot of experience there. He's also was a senior executive in the consumer electronics side of Sears Holdings and also president of Wireless Advocates. Welcome, Jim. Welcome to the Flywheel Effect. Thanks for joining us.
Really glad to have you guys, or to be on with you guys. So I apologize in the background. We're working on a major project, which we'll get into, but it adds a little character to the podcast. But I'm real glad to be with you guys. And, I've gotten to know Matt really well over the last 12 months, and I really appreciate the invite coming on board here.
So Jim, thanks a ton, Jim. Where are you sitting that's having so much work done? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, so ProSource is representing hundreds and hundreds of custom integration retailers, and a lot of people don't really understand the complication of what they do. They're putting in lighting, shading, power, health, and audio video products into homes, and they're really becoming the leading edge of technology in the home. And so what you're hearing behind me is we are standing up an experience center that'll be the only one in the country where we show all of the disciplines and products that these amazing business owners, put in every single day. And so in our business, everybody shows things individually, and to tell the story in a complete fashion, I think, is really important. And so we're standing up an experience center here in Golden. It's called 1010. 5280 is Colorado. I apologize for the hat, but we're under construction.
That's great. The in our intro, I didn't really talk about what ProSource is. ProSource is a buying group. Some of our listeners may not understand the value of ProSource being the largest buying group in the CI industry. But if you can give a little background on what the value that ProSource is providing, that would be great.
Yeah, I have a huge love for ProSource. So I grew up in this industry, and ProSource previously was Pro Group, and I would sit with other executives across the industry and share ideas and best practices and really learn from them. So I'd solve problems in a week that would usually take me a year to solve. And so ProSource now is, nearly 600 members, and so it's really scaled and grown, and so it's the biggest. But most importantly, it's the best. Like, we're really particular about who gets into this kind of organization, because the objective is to really represent these members as they're growing their businesses in this amazing, industry and evolving industry right now, and working with the vendors, working with guys like Matt to, work on financials and teach them how to run businesses and marketing and training and all of these different things. And so my role is to kind of orchestrate not only creating business acumen within the group, but also creating, a stronger profit platform for them to work off of by leveraging the power of the buying power of all of these members together.
What was it like? Now, ProSource is a nonprofit. You have a particular mission. This is, I believe, your first nonprofit leadership position. What was it like transitioning from the for-profit world to the nonprofit world?
It's interesting. I'll tell you, it gives me a sense of freedom. And the reason for that is, P&L and really managing to a net income and a specific margin. There's a certain discipline associated with that, and a certain decision process that you have to go through to make sure that you're managing properly to those numbers. As a nonprofit, it's the freedom with ProSource is one of the things that excites me, because I don't have to walk around going, oh my gosh, we got to make money. And my whole goal is to take all of the money that the members invest and the vendors invest and really translate in that to high value kind of services and programs for our members. And so it's actually been a lot of fun. I'm really, really enjoying it. And I think it's the right model for this industry. There's other people that do it differently, where they are trying to make money on these models. I'm proud to be part of an organization that's member owned, and our mission is not to make money, but to really help our members grow and be great at what they do.
Now, you guys both Matt and Jim, you were both at one of the big annual ProSource events last week. It'd be great to hear your perspective on what the integrators themselves, what you heard from them, and how they're looking at the market today and their businesses.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from Matt.
I thought the energy was fantastic. This was a group of, and Jim, you'll probably know the number of how many there were, but this is the group of the top integrators really across the country that are ProSource members. And I think there were some fantastic business conversations had. It seems like there's a ton of positive energy around growing themselves as business people. I think the breakout sessions were very business focused. So overall, the feedback that I got from the attendees was, of course, it's great to see each other. Everybody gets along for the most part, I think, in this group, especially at that level, and they're picking apart each other's businesses and helping one another in that way. So I thought it was really great.
Yeah, and I think those shows, it's one thing to stay at a big fancy hotel. And again, I apologize for the background noise, but it does add a little character here. So what I'm feeling is an energy within ProSource it's building, right? Like they're beginning to, take like the learnings from a guy like Matt. And Matt and I can say a lot of things to the membership, but when they talk to each other about what we're talking to them about, that's where the magic starts to happen in this group. And what I'm feeling is the conversations with me or Matt or the vendors or whatever it might be are translating into trusting conversations between the members. And that's how you grow a business. Like when you really open up and you say, hey, look, I was thinking, I don't really know what a balance sheet is. How do I deal with that? And, that's where I think Matt and I have kind of created this really cool relationship where we're starting to talk about things at a different level and a different perspective, because we're so aligned on our mission. Because all we want them to do every day is for them to be successful. And so that show, I think it demonstrates, the power of delivering on that mission.
That's great. Yeah, I think what I've heard and having attended ProSource events in the past is it is a tight group of integrators, tight group of people that appreciate the opportunity to work with it. But on the other hand, these are all incredibly independent people who believe in their own ability as business people. And when they open up and be vulnerable with each other, you can really see the benefits fly.
Yeah,
cool. Plus,
we
had a drone show.
Yeah, it always helps.
That was cool. One of the things that I've observed, Jim, since you've been around, and there was a time where I wasn't involved with ProSource, but of course I was a dealer prior to that as a member. One of the things I've observed that I think is really powerful is you're shifting the focus away from just revenue and helping these members recognize that revenue is great, and that's the one metric everybody's willing to talk about is revenue, because that's the vanity metric, right? But I think you're, through some of the conversations you're having publicly and privately, helping these members to recognize that revenue is important, but ultimately at the end of the day, you need to run a healthy business. And I think there's some lessons you've learned over your tenure in business, and also some things you've observed through others that.
Yeah, and I think, Matt, that's where you and I have connected in a really cool way. We've both kind of been around the block with businesses and understand that net income and gross profit contribution and balance sheet are difficult for somebody to understand, because the magic that they brought to their business is they're able to actually sell and go and execute, these amazing projects and all the things that they do. And, it's sometimes difficult to really stop and say, okay, look at what is my net income, or what is, the value of my business, or whatever it might be. And that's where our partnership, as we've kind of made it stronger, is pointing to that and using the ProSource tool box that we have to help support the perspective that you're creating and connecting the dots so that, we're able to use the tools that we have together to really drive a different net income. And it applies to all industries, really. Like a small entrepreneurial business is very difficult. And what I love about what Vital has done is that you found, I think a passionate, powerful niche against these small entrepreneurial guys as they're trying to figure out, okay, how do I actually grow up and create a legacy business that's making a lot of money? And it's been a lot of fun. I agree with you. And I'm very passionate about that based on my history of really understanding and looking around the corner and understanding how to make a business sustainable.
Yeah, Jim, let's dive into that history a little bit. I think your experience with Ultimate is so core to what you're doing here at ProSource and your mission. I mean, Matt and I were lucky enough to listen to you speak about your history very openly about 6 months ago. And it really opened my eyes to what you're trying to do and why. And I'd love to let you give a chance to tell that story.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So Ultimate Electronics grew up, as you said, a public business. We thought we were great. We were on pace to become a national company. And the reality was we were not looking around the corner. We were not properly sitting down and understanding how do we future-proof our business. And so as a result, a massive shift happened in the business, and Best Buy bought Magnolia Hi-Fi. And for what that means is the products that we were selling at X amount of margin suddenly shrunk, and the expenses we had in the business versus the gross profit dollars we were making, all of a sudden that switched, and we got ourselves into trouble. And the reason why I've been telling that story, and frankly, I didn't know if people would be interested in it, but the passion that it's created within the group and the phone calls that I'm having now and the relationships that I have, really getting people to open up and talk about the fact that they are not looking around the corner and they're not really looking in the mirror and saying, okay, look at what am I doing with our business? Matt brings up a very good point that revenue is like a drug, geez, I signed a $3 million deal. And I totally understand that. I've been there, I've done that in my career. But taking a $3 million deal and actually making money off of that is a totally different process, And my passion is, I feel like I've gone through that process and I'm able to use my experience to really think about all these hundreds and hundreds of amazing leaders that are really trying to live their dream. And so I'm kind of, in an odd way, kind of using that experience to live my dream, which is to help, these guys to really understand how to make these companies great over an extended period of time and not just in the short term.
So I think I'd like take that back one step earlier with Ultimate. The way I remember the story is as you were building this company with your family, you had incredible success for a fairly extended period of time, right? And understanding what those feelings of how those feelings of success impacted you, both positively and negatively. And I think understanding how that maybe prevented you from understanding what you're recognizing what the ultimate outcome of Ultimate would be by continuing down that path.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a good perspective, and thanks for pulling me back to that point. One of the things that happens in an entrepreneurial business is that you really start thinking you have the tiger by the tail, and you start to get arrogant, and that happened to me. And I'm not an arrogant guy. I would never think of myself as an arrogant guy, but I became arrogant, and it was very, very subtle in my career and in my personal life, where I really thought I had things under control and everything was going to be great and I was going to have this fantastic career and so on and so forth. And that arrogance, what it does is, and I think it does happen in small business also, where you're like, geez, all of a sudden I hear people tell me all the time, oh yeah, I went from 4 million to 5 million last year. Nobody ever tells me, I made 200,000 net income in the prior year and put it in the bank, and this year I'm going to make 500,000. I'm going to put that in the bank, and this is the way I'm going to invest that so I can make $1 million in the next year. That's just not the thinking. And I got caught into that. When we went public, our revenues were comping 10, 20% year over year, and things were going great. The other thing that the disciplines we had was our culture. Like, we did a lot of the small things perfect. When I was an executive, I sat at our customer service call center one day every single month. And all of a sudden one day, for some reason, I justified, oh, I'm too busy. Our company's getting too big. It's too complicated. Or, we used to send out Christmas presents to everybody. And all of a sudden one day I'm like, well, we could probably save $500,000 if we don't send out Christmas presents. Well, you don't understand the implications of that. You don't understand that as you've grown your business. And my challenge to our membership is make sure that you not only look forward, but it's just as important to look back and tell your story to your team and really dissect the things that have gotten you to where you are today, and don't let those things slip away because they're very delicate. Are you sending birthday cards? Do you know your employees' kids? All of these things. And the justification is arrogance that causes you to not do that. And I think the justification for not really understanding your financials in your business and really spending meaningful time with professionals like Vital is it's an arrogance. Like you think you're doing great. You're running your business on a cash accounting. I got plenty of money in the bank. Don't worry about it, honey. And so my challenge for our team is to skip failure and have a humble position with your leadership and take a servant leadership view and understand that we're all not perfect. Our businesses aren't perfect, and really kind of change your leadership to be, how can I get better? As opposed to, look how great I am.
Matt, when you've been dealing with integrators for a while, especially during COVID, where success was coming hand over fist, and now we're in a little bit different environment, relative to what Jim just said about arrogance and maintaining humility. How are you seeing that in all of the integrators and other business owners that you're working with every day? And I'd like to hear the same from Jim.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think well, I shouldn't say I think. Here's something I know. The owners that we work with, we have, a lot of members that we work with. The owners that approach every day with the mentality that there's something to learn and that they don't know it all, they're crushing it. And it almost doesn't matter what environment they're in. Some of them currently are planning for either a decrease in top line revenue or being flat over the last 3 or 4 years because of COVID. But they're not worried. They're not concerned because they recognize that, hey, this is just part of the business cycle and this is what we do. I think the owners who have more of the arrogance or the mentality that they've got it all figured out, they're scared and they don't necessarily know how to do that, how to navigate that process of dealing with the business cycle. And maybe they're not outwardly scared because they're holding that arrogance, but they may not necessarily know what to do when times change. And the reality is that business is a cycle. You have to plan for the ups, you have to plan for the downs. And, our vision is when you're planning for the down, you actually have to think about the up, right? You recognize that when business is turning downward, there will be an upward trend. And you have to make all the right decisions on the down in order for you to be propelled in the up. So it's really thinking out further than even just 12 months. And I think when somebody is open to that and they're less arrogant, there's just this place where the planning happens and it works and the business model flourishes. If there's arrogance involved, there's a lot of surprise.
And I'll give you an actual functional conversation that I had with a member. He goes, I have my call with Matt this month. And I'm afraid of it. That is humility. You know what I mean? Not that Matt's a boogeyman, but he knows and he's willing to put his biggest weakness on the table, that he doesn't understand the financials, and he works with Matt to do that. That's what good looks like to me. That's what, when you really stop and you think about it. And Matt, I think you bring up an interesting point that if you manage correctly on the downturn, the upside is where you create legacy kind of profitability in your business because you're so solid as you go into that. And as that business begins to grow, you've done all the work to make sure that, maximum net income is generated as the economy will turn around. And it will.
Yeah.
Nobody knows when, but it will.
Yeah, I appreciate that additional insight and story, Jim. Thank you. I smile because I think you use Matt metaphorically. Our entire team functions in that way, and all of our Vital guides hold that level of accountability. But that just sparked a recent example with one of our members who just bought a building, which is the right time for him to do that, the right time for him to invest, because he knows what the other side of the cycle looks like, with as much certainty as he can, where other people might be holding on and, in a time where they should be investing, right? So that's that's where we look at the business cycles differently. And the only way that we know to inform those decisions is through good metrics. When you have those metrics, you can say, hey, here's what's happening. So this is not a vital situation, a vital podcast necessarily, but I think that's an interesting side point that I wanted to bring up.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to like kind of have this as like a vital podcast or a Mac podcast, but the point is, the frame that I'm trying to use is Matt is a proxy for really reaching out and being open for help. And so, that's kind of the reason I'm using Matt as just an idea of how there's a variety of people around your business that can help you out, and just be open to asking for that help.
How are you fostering a culture change in ProSource to really cause your integrators to do that with you and your team, of having that open door for them and having them walk through?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've done a lot of kind of studying and research on small groups and big groups, and what is the difference between a group that really has maximum deep collaboration driving success and groups that are just like meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. A lot of it comes in business culture, but it's interesting when you go into small groups of various entrepreneurial people coming together, it's a whole nother discipline. And so in studying that, a company called YPO, Young Presidents Organization, I was involved, with that as a young age, and I learned a lot. And so I've talked with some of the best of the best. And what I'm trying to create at ProSource, we stood up this thing a program called V11, which is small groups of 10 dealers. They come together, and we put them through a very specific process to create trust. And trust is the key kind of driver and fire of creating greatness in these groups. And entrepreneurs typically keep everything inside. Failures inside. I'm struggling inside. I can't pay my employees. They keep all that to themselves. I can't afford the inventory. They keep that to themselves. They even keep the personal stresses of businesses, running a business, which is it's one of the most magical things, but also one of the most stressful things that you can do. And so what we've done is we've really put a model and what I'm promoting across the entire group is real trust, not just fake with, on some screen and some big presentation, but real, this is a non-disclosure organization where you can tell people your deepest, darkest secrets, because those are the ones that you have to solve. You could solve all the, like high level things, but until you're willing to pull somebody aside and tell them, man, I don't know what a balance sheet is. That is the thing that triggers acceleration in business. And so trust is one of my primary focuses, both in our V11 groups, which we have 9 of them now, and it's just going amazingly well. We've been very disciplined with the way to do that, but even across the broader group, and even with our vendors, to be able to, you can trust Matt. Like I had one of our members call up that was having a hard time. I call Matt. I say, look, can you call this guy? Maybe you charge him, maybe you don't, but can you just call him and give him some calmness because he's been transparent with me? Sure enough, boom, they talk, and at least it gives a level of comfort within the group. That's what good looks like. If we can really act as a family, as a trusting family, and almost put our egos and everything aside, great things are going to happen for ProSource.
That's great.
Awesome, Jim. Hey, quick question for you around that, Jim. For those of our audience who aren't in our industry, what does good look like for them? Like, what should they seek out in their industries to help level up their businesses? What might they be looking for out there?
Yeah, I think that business is interesting because the core, in my view, many people think that when you're running a business, it's the fact that you understand that particular trade is the magic. I've never felt that way. Understanding that trade gets you into the game. The magic is having the discipline to run the business correctly and exposing yourself. And so what I would say is really identifying trade groups, shows, vendor partners like yourself, or even me. Like I don't, if somebody in the pool business wants to give me a call and have a discussion, who knows? I mean, maybe I can connect them with somebody else. The most important thing is to find partnerships. Don't be afraid of the competition in your market. I tell people this all the time. The competition in your market is 1 + 1 = 3. Go talk to Roger, take him out for coffee. What are you dealing with? Can we buy things together? Can we work with the distributor together? You know, are you financially sound? You know, maybe we can hire an accountant to come in and take a look at both of our books and it'll be less expensive. And so this concept, especially in small business, that everybody's your enemy, it's not necessarily the case. You'd be surprised how many friends you have in your own particular market. And so I would really promote any small business to make sure that you're really seeking those kind of partnerships and relationships. There's a company called an organization called C12, which is an organization that serves small businesses, and all they do is collaborate. And so searching that out, Googling that, figuring out where can I go to share my thoughts and my concerns and my ideas in your particular market would be my challenge.
Thanks, Jim.
That's right.
Yeah, and it sounds like the requirement for all of that is the theme that you brought up earlier, which is humility. And without that, you're not going to be open to any of this, right? So thank you. It's awesome.
Because you can live in your own bubble as an arrogant business owner, and that bubble is uncomfortable and it's not as fun. Whereas if you have a humble point of view and you really bring in people into your world, I think it's a hell of a lot more fun. I think, Matt, you do too. Like over the years, it's a lot more fun when we're sharing stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much out there to learn. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing whatever it is that you're doing. There's so much to learn.
Yeah, I learn every day. And once I made the switch to really, unfortunately, I had failure to get to humility, but it's just been a lot more fun. It's been, I just have better perspective. I'm more curious, more open to having conversations with people. Whereas before it was like everything was a battle. And so I do agree with you that this servant, humble leadership, a book that I would suggest everybody reads is Servant Leader. I think it's one of the greatest business books ever read. And the discipline it teaches is that you put everybody in front of you and you put yourself at the back. And if you do that, you'll be surprised, how much happier you are and how much success you'll have.
Yeah, totally good. And that is such a hard mindset for most people to have, especially type A business owners, right? It's like, I got to do everything. I'm the most important one. You don't realize they're going to grow so much more if they flip it around.
Yeah, because you're the boss every day. You walk in, you tell everyone what to do. They listen to everything that you say. They get you coffee. They do whatever you want to do, and so that creeps into arrogance.
Yep.
Yes.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I think it's especially prevalent in the trades in particular, because if you unpack the history of many of these trade businesses, they were started on the foundation of I can do it better than the other guy. Right. And so, you look at how those trade businesses came to be. They came to be from a little bit of arrogance, right? And saying, hey, I'm either not being treated well, so I'm going to start my own gig, or many of them, I can do the pools better than this guy. I can do an AV system better than that guy. And I think that's, my guess as to why it's so prevalent in the trades, that there's this brick wall or block wall between them and, everybody else.
One other thing I wanted to highlight that you said, Jim, is you brought up how many people think in a zero-sum way, which I think that zero-sum thinking is among the most dangerous things that we have in the world right now. And it's everywhere. Like, I'm not going to talk politics show, but if you look at politics, both sides ultimately come to zero-sum thinking in the way they come about their positions. And I think, and I like your perspective on this, when you're talking to small business owners, they do think, for me to win, somebody else has to lose, which is a zero-sum thought. And it's, how do you cultivate the 180 change to an abundance mindset where we can all make absolutely more together than we can apart? And I think that fundamental change in mentality is one of the most important drivers to success. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you got that right. It's interesting. You don't start a small business unless you are a driving A-plus personality that has arrogance. Because you're right. You're like, I can do this better than anybody else. And so therefore, I'm going to invest my personal finances into it. I'm going to invest my life into it. Maybe I don't hang out with my family as much as I should, but growing a business is incredible. 85% of businesses fail. So we get to sit in a room where we have 600 people that have made it over that hump. And so once you do make it over that hump, that's when you have to reassess. I'm not saying coming into it when you're young and you just have to fight every single day and it's 7 days a week. That's not, there's a point where a company begins to crest and you get over the hump where you're not going to go out of business tomorrow. You're not at, you can start to hire people, and that's when you have to start to understand that you're not the smartest guy in the room. And for those that do that, I know, Matt, you see this all the time. The most successful people in our organization, the most successful people I see even outside of our organization, are the ones who have made the change. And they're like, I'm going to spend more time listening and less time talking. I'm going to spend more time learning than I am bragging about all the stuff that I'm doing. Because really, at the end of the day, nobody really cares. What people care about is a paycheck and a successful business and a great culture and happiness and all of those things. And that's where, your kind of legacy begins to build.
That's great, Jim. I mean, thinking back to Ultimate, let's bring it full circle, where you kind of pointed out here in this last couple minutes how identifying what growth and success actually means gives you a higher probability of continued success in the future. At Ultimate, the ultimate demise of Ultimate was part of it was, you said, your arrogance. Was there a point prior to its demise where if you had a different perspective, you feel that you could have turned around and continued to grow?
No question. When you go public as a company, the whole dynamic changes, and we had no idea we were doing that. We just knew we got a bunch of money in the bank, and we were cool guys, right? Like we're ringing the bell, doing all these different things, And if we would have had this really humble perspective of our business prior to going through that process, I truly believe the business would still be, in business today. And the reason for that is we would have pulled back. We would have stopped growth. We would have eliminated stores that really weren't working and that we would justify, Cedar Rapids is going to be okay. We'll figure it out, put in a new manager, whatever it might be. We would have made the proper decisions to make sure that the business had long-term success as opposed to short-term accelerated growth. And it's a really good question. I'm not sure I've ever talked about this publicly, but there are multiple small decisions that that we did not make that we could have made. And one of them is to stop growth. I mean, I talked to a member last week and he goes, well, I'm going to push to 4.5 million. And I asked him a simple question. I go, is that smart? He goes, what do you mean? I go, are you better off at 4.5 million or better off at 4 million? And he didn't know the answer. Right. And so again, it gets back to this kind of addiction of revenue as opposed to really making the disciplined decisions. Because many times he might be better off doing $3.5 million of revenue as opposed to 4 million or $4.5 million of revenue. And then it allows you to build your house and foundation in a way that when you get to 4.5 million, you are set up to be successful. You are set up to, make the money that you think you're going to make when you do that. And so I think I'm answering the question. If not, I apologize, but I'm just trying to, maybe give a perspective that when you get this humble look at your business, growth is not necessarily translating into profit. Many times it's translating into failure.
I think, Brent, that was a great question, and thanks for answering in that way, Jim. I think I would add one more just direct question. With the advantage of hindsight, would you have gone public? Would you have made that decision again?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, because slowing growth is real tough when you're a public company, right?
Yeah,
like making some of those decisions.
I might be in conflict with other people that were around that business. It gets back to humility, because there is a personal thing that happens when you go public. I mean, there's a personal wealth effect and things like that.
Yeah.
And I think another interesting perspective about going public is there's short-term versus long-term, and you get those two confused. And short-term feels real good when all of a sudden they're like, yeah, we're going to go public and we're going to make an offering and, you get a lot of money. And what you don't realize, you have a lot of bosses and all these different, I don't want to get into all the details, but have a long view of your business. Don't have that short view. And, be thinking about things like running your company like a corporation as opposed to an S corp. And like driving your net income down to zero by trying to write off every single thing you possibly can to get to zero at the end of the year and not pay taxes. If what like things like, and I haven't talked to you about this, Matt, but things like, how about I become an LLC and actually pay myself a salary, and earn a solid salary and begin to pay taxes and begin to create a roadmap for long-term success in a business. That's the kind of thinking that you have to do, and it's challenging as a small business owner because you're busy and you have all these things. Just be humble, step back, partner with, I don't think I'm that smart, but like guys like Matt and I are talking, and we get so fired up when we talk because we're trying to figure out how do we connect with all of our members and even other small businesses like talking about. I don't care if it's a pool guy or the electrician or whatever it might be. We just want to see success out there in small business.
That's a great point, Jim. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, I actually really love that conversation because when you talk about some of your readers trying to go to 4.5 million, I just think of, revenue doesn't actually pay the bills, right? Like to pay the bills, you need profit and cash. And if your revenue is not profitable enough, if you don't have an ROI or ROE, but you pick your choice of metric, it's all a shell game, right? Or it can become one very quickly and unknown that you're building something that's no longer sustainable. Which gets me to one other point that you made, which was you talked about discipline. And when I think about discipline with the trades and these small business people, part of the discipline is understanding data and metrics, which in my experience, in a variety of ways, is one of the hardest things to build as a small business owner because you don't feel it is productive work, right? Like you think it's, that's just the stuff I got to do to make sure I can do run my actual company. And for both of you, Matt and Jim, you're dealing with this every day. How do you build the mentality of data, metric, and structure that will allow these businesses to actually become sustainable legacy businesses?
That's a great question, Brent. I think we're figuring that out because the psychology is very, very tough. When I say we're figuring it out, we're 3 years into taking over Vital, and we still have a small subset, thankfully, of our members who aren't getting it, right? Meaning they want to keep doing things the same way, and get some different result. And so I think the psychology of making that shift has been difficult for us. I don't have the answer other than I think the most obvious thing for us has been once they see the data clearly, there's this light bulb moment. And unfortunately, that can take months in some cases, depending on how much of a mess they have. But once they see that data clearly and they recognize that, I can make decisions now based on this data that affect me 6 months or a year from now, with data that's not 12 months old, right? With data that's a month old, I think that's the light bulb moment. We haven't yet figured out how to show them that in a useful way prior to just seeing it for themselves.
It's interesting, like hopefully this analogy is correct. So I was at the gym and the guy asked me, "Do you ever stretch?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "I'll bet you because you think it's boring." And I said, "Yeah, totally. Why would I?" He goes, "And you also don't think it's productive." And I said, "Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't think it's productive. Like, I want to go work out on machines and run around and ride bikes and do all these things because that's what I think is getting me in shape." And he told me, he goes, "Jim, you're totally missing the boat because all those other things that you're doing translate to almost the poor health if you're not stretching your body and taking the time to do that." And I think about your discipline is kind of the same thing.
That's a great analogy. I think we all hate stretching, but we got.
Yeah, but it's funny. Like when I actually do take the time to do it, I feel good.
It feels good.
And I think that's where a guy like Vital and Matt and you guys are so magical because you open it up and you show it to them, and it's not scary once you see it. You feel good once you stretch. You know what I mean? It's just having the discipline, to your point, Brent, having the discipline to actually do it. And you have to be very thoughtful about sticking your nose into this stuff and really understanding it. If you do, you'll be successful.
Yeah, it's hard. But it is literally like stretching. It's like, who wouldn't rather bench press 225 a dozen times? I'm not doing that right now, but you feel good. It shows off to the chicks in the gym. That's the way it goes.
Totally.
putting up, building really cool projects and having a pool come up and down in the middle of the living room is a cool project. Doing the books in the back is not. But those are the guys that are actually successful.
That's a great analogy, Jim. And I'll add to that analogy, the whole stretching thing. Thankfully, somebody turned me on in a very similar way that you got turned on to that a while ago. And then I was recently turned on to warm up, which to me feels like 15 minutes of completely useless time in addition to stretching. So now I'm adding 30 minutes to my gym time, 15 minutes in the front, 15 minutes in the back. But I'll tell you what, that warm up time improves my performance during the exercise. And it's just wild. Like it's such a good analogy. I'm glad that you brought that to the table because you're absolutely dead on. Like that to me, every single time I do the warm up, I'm like, God, why am I doing this? But then I remember as I'm performing the exercise, how much better it is. So great analogy.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah. Thanks, Brent, for asking that.
Oh, you're welcome. Now, I think we've identified nobody really likes stretching, and all of our small business people out there who are hopefully listening probably don't either. But as far as the analogy goes, but they also don't like doing the back end stuff, right? Like they just don't. They feel, oh, I got to get a job from 3 to 5 when I should be doing the books. What are the small steps that we can give them to start them on down the path of actually paying attention to this stuff? I think, it's fine to say, hey, you should do it, but what's step 1 and 2?
I think step number 1, I don't want to overplay it, but the humility piece of really understanding that you actually do need to do this and, really finding the correct partner for you to have those conversations. Many times it starts with like business owners and beginning to ask, what do you do? How do you deal with your financials? And what I'm finding is there's a lot of trust between our members in, what if vinyl pops up? Great. If something else pops up, great. I think Matt and I are kind of aligned that we almost don't care in an odd way. And that's why we do care. All we really want is for them to begin the process of asking questions, being humble, and really, trying to find people that they can learn from.
And Matt, what's your step 1?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think a caveat I would place in there, and this has just recently come up, I speak across the country many, many, many times. And at the back of the room, after I speak, there's usually a handful of people who come up to me and they ask me questions. And the question often starts out with, what are most people doing about fill in the blank? And just in the last year, I've been pushing back and saying, do you want what most people are doing, or do you want what the most successful people are doing? And they look at me cross, and I say, because the average, let's say net operating performance is X. So are you above or below that currently? Because most likely you're doing what everybody else is doing if you're average. And if you want to be average, I'll tell you exactly what most people are doing about this particular thing. But if you want to know what the most successful people are doing about this particular thing, it's different than what most people are doing. And I think that's the caveat when it comes to talking about these situations with your peers. We're very familiar with a number of, I'll call them clicks, a number of clicks in our industry that are very, very useful for the people that are involved in those clicks. But believe it or not, as much trust as those clicks have, they're still not talking about their deep financial data. And so they really don't know how well their peer is doing financially when they ask the question of, how are you handling this particular situation? And that's a long-winded way of saying, if you're going to have a peer group of any kind, you have to go deep. You have to understand the performance of the people in the group and whether or not you should be taking advice from those people in these particular areas, right? And I think Jim brought this up a little while ago about trust being that foundation of any peer group of any way, shape, or form, even if it's just friends and family, right?
Man, I know we're kind of winding down here, but I want to really compliment you on the point that you have to know who you're talking to. Don't hang with the people who don't know what they're talking to. Hang with the people that do really understand this stuff. There are a lot of smaller groups around. I was at a meeting where a really great group of dudes, they have a negative equity in the overall group. It's a big group, and so just make sure you're hanging with the right people. I think that's a point that you're trying to make, is that find the guys who are financially, solid and have really good financial acumen, and ask them what to do, because that's how you get better. And friendships are great, but hanging out with people that really understand this part of the business is very, very important.
Your goal should be to always be the least successful person in the room.
And I think you can have both. There are cliques that, groups where, they just crush it in sales. And these groups are high revenue, high performing groups. And some of the members of that group also perform really well in their bottom line. But because they're not often talking about the bottom line, it's tough for them to really assess the right questions to ask. And so that's what I would encourage, just to underscore that topic. Jim, thank you so much for adding to that.
That's most people are fishermen. Their fish is always bigger than it actually was. Right. So this has been a great talk so far. Just want to, Matt, do you have anything else to add here? Or Jim, would you like to add anything as well?
I don't. I think this has been great, Jim. Thank you so much for bringing up the points that you did and also bringing the humility. I think your leadership around that particular topic is just beginning. And so far, I've experienced that it's gone pretty deep. And I think as the months and years go by, it will go even deeper and you will actually transform not just your group, but the entire industry. And I appreciate that.
Yeah. I appreciate that, Matt. I will say that I appreciate our growing friendship and business relationship. And it took me a minute to get my feet on the ground, but once you and I started to kind of crank up, and Brent, you also, the relationship with you guys, I think that there's a 1 + 1 = 3 here. And I'm not even saying that from a business standpoint, but more from when we talk, it seems like we find some really cool new things to talk about. And I appreciate you guys doing this podcast. And I certainly hope that it's very successful. And I appreciate you guys taking an hour today to talk.
Yeah, appreciate your time, Jim. I just want to echo what Matt said here. Your willingness to share is something that is too rare about failure. We all learn from our failures so much more than our successes. And where we can also learn is from other people's failures. And so don't be afraid, and this is a message to the world, don't be afraid to share what went wrong, because somebody's going to be able to learn and avoid that in the future. So let's keep these conversations open. Before we sign off, if you have enjoyed this conversation and you have found value in it, please do us a favor and share it. We do not have advertising. We do not monetize this, but we want to touch as many people as we can in the luxury home service industry. Share it when you can. Give us a like, give us a review. Appreciate your time. And for all of us here, Matt, and for Jim, thank you very much. We'll see you next time on the Flywheel Effect.
Peace out.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for tuning in to the Flywheel Effect. Our journey through the intricate world of luxury home services continues to be fueled by your passion for excellence and innovation. If you found value in our conversations today, don't forget to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. More insights and resources. Visit us online at growwithvital.com. Until next time.